two of my favourite of the intro sequences there between Lucky Future and Suning. Jing and Yueying going to be facing off here at the start of day number 3. Going straight into the action. Both players lost 3-0 last time around. And so losing this, obviously going 0-2. And then they're out of action for 2 weeks. The individuals, obviously the teams carry on. Be a serious blow to their chance of getting to the World Championships this year. Or at least from this season. So, Jing taking on with the Rogue. It is the Stealth Rogue, I believe. Just double checking that. And Yueying, obviously, with the Mage. Had all this laid out nicely, and the second the stream begins... I don't have it laid out nicely anymore. It is the Stealth Rogue. Don't even know why I doubted myself, to be honest. So, Yueying with that all-crucial Zephyrus in his hand to start the game with. Always makes things very difficult for your opponent when you draw not only your Zephyrus but also your Reno, your Highlander cards, the defining cards of the deck. And it's going to be incredibly difficult there for Jing to establish, especially as he hasn't actually drawn anything in play. Yeah, and just the deep sigh there. PNC style sigh. Not at all happy. If you think you've seen these players before, and you're a regular follower of the English broadcast scene, then you have. You are not going crazy. They played each other in the World Championships, of all things, in 2019, where Jing on that day was victorious in the quarterfinals. And of course that took him into the semi-finals, because that's how seedings work, where he did come unstuck. But two players who have extreme, extensive experience facing off here on day 3. And that seems to have been the theme. I don't know if there's some rule that makes it better to lead from the front, or if it's just psychological, you want your teams to get off to the best start. But we have seen a lot of the star players coming out here in week 1. That does mean that weeks 2 and 3 we may get to see some of the players we don't know much about or haven't seen before. And also we will still to see our world champion Lion for VK. She will be playing at some point in the next 2 weeks. Be great to see how she gets on. She's been having a terrific year. She did manage another top 8 in a Masters Tour very recently, so she is following on like she means to go on, just like previous champions, particularly Pavel, did before her. Jing still can't play anything. He wants to keep that coin for turn 4 to get those 5 drops active, and this is just horrendous for him. Resisting the urge to waste, eviscerates or something. There's no reason to just suddenly start eviscerating face unless you think you're just not going to get it done, but already looking like he's in a world of trouble. He's a mana behind, or 2 mana behind on Yueying's turn, so 1.5 total. And Yueying's actually got the option of just throwing out a Doomsayer here, but then his Reno will become useless. The interesting thing here is that Yueying can't press the advantage particularly well because his hand is all removal and there's nothing to remove. Kind of amusing to me. So yeah, just developing. Obviously Bone Wraith, a pretty irritating minion to get through at the best of times, and when your opponent has nothing, might be there for some time. Guess he'll be looking to try and play this Reno on turn 7. He may play it on 6 with a board presence if there seems to be a reason to do so. Like, he does have plenty of stuff to go with here. With the Pilgrim in hand, he may just decide to play Reno on 7 anyway and go from there. This might be tempting to him. He might just want this out of the way now. We'll give him 6 attack on board with Blizzard in hand as a backup plan. Into Pilgrim. He has the amazing Reno on 10, which normally isn't much of a consideration this early, but when your opponent's doing nothing, probably has a decent, or he probably thinks he has a decent grasp on what his opponent's hand is as well. It would occur to him that there's Galakon. He might think there's Kronks as well. There's really not that many expensive cost cards in this deck. will notice that Jing kept back the Skyver. That's because he knows that Reno can kill it. There's plenty of cards. Actually, there's plenty. Anyway, there's Reno can kill it. There's other cards can do damage. So he just kept it back, not going into the Reno turn. He would ideally like to obviously have a Grey Heart Sage to play with it. So he can deal with the first half of the Bone Wraith here. If he wants to use his Lackey, his Maniac, his Dagger. And yeah, instead going with something that seems just slightly better. The reason I was going my way is I'd like to have got the Maniac into play just to get another Lackey, just to try and get something to do. But he's going to try and possibly do this with the Lackey as well. But then you haven't got a Lackey if you draw Togwaggle for next turn. I guess that's okay. Togwaggle's not coming down next turn anyway. It's not coming down to about turn 8 or 9. So, plus he hasn't actually got one in his hand yet. What a horrible state of affairs for Jing. Both of these players lost their first match 3-0. Yueying lost to Trunks and Jing lost to Lee. So, losing the first game here, yeah, Jing's really not happy with this at all, and I don't blame him. I usually, in the olden days when Rogue had like preparations and shadow steps, and sometimes they just draw a hand of absolute, literal nothing, 0 costing cost cards that didn't do anything, and they would lose, and they'd get salty, and they'd show all their preps and shadow steps on their rubbish hand. I'd feel like, unlucky you put that rubbish in your deck. Why are you showing me this? But Jing has a legitimate concern here. This deck has a lovely curve. There's plenty going on. And he just hasn't drawn a card that does anything in the first 5 turns. That's pretty brutal. Yeah, there are things about this particular breed of rogue that can go wrong. You can, in fact, you can end up with too much stuff in your hand sometimes and not enough mana to do it with. That's one of the downsides, maybe, the Grey Heart Sage. But now he's got to get himself together. The game, despite the fact he's at a massive disadvantage, does begin now. And so if he's going to get the whatever percentage he has left here, he needs to really play accurately from here on in. So my first consideration actually would be that he doesn't need to worry about getting more cards. I think that he's going to get to the point now where every turn he draws something, he can play it. Face is Corrupted needs to come down soon to get some attack on the board. I feel like you take care of the Reno here. I know he's trying to hold on to his one Lackey, but he gets another one back. Yeah, so he's going to do that play, but he's starting off by seeing what he draws. Just good ordering. And with that ordering, he has managed to preserve his Lackey, because I know he hasn't, but it turns out that Praise Galacon doesn't give your minion rush as well as +1. Who knew? But yeah, now he's developed at least some kind of board. Obviously, still a bit of a sad state of affairs, but at least he's playing Hearthstone now rather than just watching. But his fears are going to be justified when he sees what Yueying has. Just has basically everything you could want going on. Always the intriguing bit of mage decks for me is the point where they switch from the defender, which they do handsomely for the first few turns, into winning the game. Alex Straza is usually a very good way of doing that, so this might be an interesting turn. Something he could consider doing is just developing his Prime, or his Astromancer Solarian, more to the point, Doomsayer, ping down the 5/1. And, okay, Jing can deal with a Doomsayer, but he probably can't deal with it and develop. As it happens, he might be able to, from we can see, because he played Devoted Maniac and the Kobold and the Eviscerate to get rid of a Doomsayer. But then he could have played Alex Straza afterwards if that didn't happen. But instead he's decided to grab the tempo right now, developing this Deep Freeze. relying on the fact he's going to be able to ping out the last point on the Shield of Galakond next turn and or play Alex Raza. Much harder to remove 2 3/6s than a 0-7, of course. And maybe slightly suspicious as to what's going on in the opposing hand because, yeah, this weird start from Jing has just... I was going to say bamboozled, but there is no bamboozle. Yueying a little bit. Like, you start wondering what the trap is, what you're falling for, what mistake you're making when your opponent just does nothing with Rogue for this long. And through all that, I mean, Jing has been chipped down to 19. Which is a bit unusual at this stage. So he does take care of one of the water elementals. And I am curious to see how Yueying decides to play this next turn, because my instinct is just to jam the Alex Raza and see where you're at. You're almost level on board going into the turn. Is there any need to keep killing things? You can just go for the throat here, I think. And the amount of resources that Rogue would have to use to kill this and friends is a lot. Obviously, something might get returned. There's no Blackjack Stunner, though, so that should be enough. Trying to remember the name of this dragon. I know it's got 2 Z's in it somewhere. I've seen it once somewhere in this tournament already. Things always look really weird when they cost 0 as well. As you can hear me clicking through, desperately trying to remember the name of this. And desperately trying to cheat. Yeah, Zeraku, the Warped. Has got 2 Z's in it. I knew that part. Or Z's, if you're listening across the Atlantic. But the important part is the minion is crazy. If you take damage, you get a 6/6, which means you can ping your own face. And the fact it's defended by the taunt, it's just a fantastic roll here for Yueying off his Alex. Jing is having his own swing turn attempt here. Trying to get as much as he can out of his Galakon turn. But he does have to take care of this 4-12 before going any further. And it's just not going to happen for him. That is one of the things that is slightly lacking in this stealth version of the Rogue. I do personally feel it's the best of the 3 out of stealth, secret and Highlander. But the problem is, even though you often draw a lot of cards, you kind of don't do much with them a lot of the time. And this was a fantastic looking Hearthstone turn. And obviously it started running up a hill. There's so much it had to do. But not a lot changed by the end of the turn. Also, Blizzard here while you're pinging your own face. Looks pretty good to me. And you can just replay your Alex in some situations as well. And I've already mentioned this once in one of my casts for this tournament, but sometimes this sort of turn is the hardest to play. You've got to make sure you do something. Because you can't have a bad turn here. Like, even if you played the amazing Reno, which would be really, really bad, you're probably still winning. And the trap you can fall into if you're not careful here is not making a clear decision by the end of your turn. It's usually correct to just make sure you do something coherent, and this is coherent. This make a big board, get rid of my opponent's board. That's basically as coherent as it goes in Hearthstone. And I think that was the right play. But, you know, if you chose to trade a couple of things off and play the Alex again, that's probably coherent as well, as long as you know what you're trying to do. But this sets up a huge lethal. You know your opponent's struggling, and unless I'm missing something spectacular from a spell lucky generation into a rogue spell that kills these 4 minions all at once. Yeah, good luck with that. I think we're looking at 1-0. I guess there's Flick into Shadow Step, into Flick. That can keep him alive. And then what happened? Get double sap from lackeys? Can eviscerate the prime? Alright. Still alive. Still alive. And next turn can kill another thing, but next turn you'll be facing another 6/6. If you're not dead. I don't think you are actually. I think you just jam Alex again. Go absolutely crazy. You can also ping your own face and play Siamat. I mean, how would you like to entertain, young man? How would you like the crowd to feel? Yeah, don't play that one on the right. That might be an accident. You probably still win, but the flick kills it. Yeah, maybe you actually lose if you play Deathwing. And at this point, I'm just hoping to be put out of my misery. Get on to game number 2. I think I've exhausted all the avenues of he might stay alive. Alright, there's a Togwaggle. He might stay alive. That's your out. You play Togwaggle, even if you can't think what it can draw you that can save you it. Nothing in your hand's doing it. You can still play your flick after you Tog, but... Okay, so with your hand, without playing Togwaggle, you can flick into killing the 4/12, into playing 2/4/4 Corruptors. You do not clear the board, so you have to Tog. Goes for the wand. He knows that this is like impossible. But there's no reason not to check it out. But there is mercy. And Yueying takes a 1-0 lead, and we're going to go into game 2. It is last hero standing. He will be on the mage again. And as you can see, he will be up against either warrior or that Highlander hunter. And quite rightly, in my opinion, going for this Highlander hunter. Warrior actually does have a reasonably mediocre matchup against the mage. Seems weird to say it, but mage just manages to keep things at bay long enough a lot of the time, whereas hunter can just keep chipping away and chipping away. Does need to get a reasonable start, otherwise again you see what happens when you don't start well against mage. It just takes over the game. Oops, sorry about that. And these points of damage at the start here are going to be extremely valuable for Jing. No real good way of taking care of it yet either for Yueying. You see the difference. Last game he had Zephyrus and a pair of Rhinos, and this game he has the minions that you have to play if you want to play Highlander. Minions, and there's nothing wrong with these cards, but you have to fill out your deck with subpar, non-perfect cards. And one of the reasons that Highlander's been so strong is in recent times, even the imperfect cards are good enough. But in this game, just getting to the point where maybe that's not the case. This is an irritating amount of damage. He does get to play the ice barrier to basically reset the next turn. That was always a thing in Freeze Mage. Your ice barrier buys you a free turn. The opponent will have roughly 8 damage on the board, and you will mitigate roughly 8 of that damage. Fireball looks pretty good to me. You're going to get into the turns soon where bigger minions are going to start appearing and you're not going to be able to take care of them. So for me, I like the fireball choice. You don't know what it is you need it for. You just know that the Highlander Hunter mid-range minions are going to cause you a degree of distress. Huh. Pretty useless looking Zephyrs here. I think you get offered either Sorcerer's Apprentice or another 3/2 when you play with 2 mana remaining. I can never remember what the other one is. Sorcerer's Apprentice obviously reduces the spell costs. And there's a very similar card that is functionally different. You sometimes get offered for board development. Yeah, and this is good though. Oh, the Chaplain. I quite like the Temple Enforcer or the Doom. I never thought I'd say this, but Temple Enforcer might actually be pretty good. I think Doomhammer's better, but you don't want your face to get frozen by those water ellies or it never attacks again. So it actually goes for the first time in the history of Hearthstone for Temple Enforcer. And honestly, I think it was quite possibly correct. He knows his opponent is playing Weapon Destruction, both in the Sticky Finger and with the Swamp Ooze, and he's seen not much getting played. So there is a strong chance here that this is just the right pick. And as we can see, giving up a Sticky Finger would have been catastrophic. He'd have lost his board to the Sticky Finger pretty much. But now the Rolling Fireball and the fight back starts here. But the good news of the Temple Enforcer is, okay, this isn't ideal from where I was, but it's still just a beefy minion. I think the way he's hovering, he's trying to work out, well, is there a way I can get the Griffin down into the Enforcer and give it some actual health total? But that was way too slow. You do have to keep this pressure on. So this is the Fireball that was taken for reasons unknown. And the unknown reason turned out to be a deck card that was exactly 6 health that wasn't in the deck. So that turned out nicely. Interesting. I mean, this makes absolute sense, obviously, developing the board. But the Griffin just gets taken care of immediately. And from 17, maybe Jing could have considered trying to weave in a hero power every turn. He does have direct damage in hand. But it's not quite as linear as all that. First of all, Yueying has his own Zephyrus somewhere for healing. He also has Alexstrasza in there that can get him back to 15. But you're trading 3 mana for 2 directly here with nothing actually coming from it by playing the Griffin. However, you knew your opponent did nothing on turn 4, so maybe you're okay to do this. Maybe you know that if he answers it, he can't play anything else, because that's basically the situation. Yeah, he had to find a time to play this Ice Barrier because it's just getting to the point where it was possible for Jing to win without using minions, which means you would waste your Ice Barrier. You need to do it at some point before you get too low. So he decided this was his bits and pieces turn. The turn looks absolutely fine when it's resolved like this anyway. Trying to buy himself some time to get to that Arcane Intellect, maybe on 8 alongside a 5-drop. But in my opinion, the most powerful card in Hearthstone, Solarian Prime. This isn't like the absolute best board for it, but the rest of the hand is kind of weak. You could consider developing your own Searmad, I guess, but it doesn't really work out for you. I like this. It will sometimes go wrong, but of course it only targets opponents' minions. This will tend to be at least reasonable and sometimes pretty nutty. Oh no! This isn't going as he wanted at all. That's better. So that went badly. And now we're looking at lethal possibilities. 25 damage. 12 from the minion. 3 from the doggies. That's 15. 3 from kill command. That's 20. Hero power. 22. 22 isn't 25, but it's pretty close to it. And then next turn, draw a dragon. Get your corrosive breath to work. Yeah, attacking face, because he didn't know for sure that was the secret. I think he had a good idea, but yeah, you need to make sure you're not just straight up missing lethal. He is dead on the backswing if he ignores everything on the board. So he can't just put Yueying to 3 and move on with his life. He actually has to do something about the board. And that's always really annoying in Hearthstone. It's also why the game is complicated, because you can be so close to lethal, but being so far away means that he just can't proceed with the damaging. He has to do something else. Which means he's going to have a certain amount of risk here. Yep. Just saying, okay, I got you next turn. If you haven't got me. And with that spell damage, there's a chance that there is just death coming up. Gonna freeze the entire board, or a large chunk of it. In fact, the 6/6 is just a large chunk of it, right? There's not much else. Takes care of the Zigzor and says, okay, I'm just going to kill you next turn. And Jing was in a good spot here, but look how quickly it has turned around. Excuse the silence, I'm trying to desperately work out how this could ever go well for Jing. And again, he lost his first match 3-0. Losing 3-0 again, or whatever, would be a disaster for him. The team aspect makes it that much harder when this happens. But game 1, I don't think he could do much about. This game, there were other options available, although nothing seemed too terrible. All seemed fine to me. So yeah, he's looking for, have I forgotten a dragon that saves me the game? He just can't take lethal off the board. Yeah, he gives it up. 2-0 Yueying. And just the warrior left for Jing. Which, if you're going to be stuck with one deck in Last Hero Standing, that's the one you'd pick. It's massively favoured against Demon Hunter and Rogue. And isn't... I'm going to go with 50-50 in this matchup. I think that the warrior is regarded as being favourite, but Mage does pretty well in this matchup. It's pretty close. So, point being, Jing not out of it yet. If he can win this game with the warrior, he has every chance of running through the lineup. We've seen several decks do that. Well, if he loses this game with the warrior, we're going to see Mage do it. And if he wins with the warrior, we might well see warrior do it. This might well be the deciding game. One way or the other. So remember that this was played a little while ago before the nerfs. And people still hadn't got this deck list down to being particularly tight. So with that in mind, you understand why there are dormant minions in this deck. At 2-5, it's pretty good at picking up opposing minions. Obviously that's not so useful against a mage. But against mage, and Zephyrus really hurts you when you're playing warrior. Like, absolutely terribly hurts you. Because you normally get a free run at the warrior when it doesn't do this. And you get so much damage in that they're constantly on the back foot. And this is now exactly the opposite to that. This is, you are constantly in a good spot. It's the Vile Fiend Undormant. So he's just trying to work out where he wants to put this damage. There's good options around all over here. Getting a live wire out of the way now and starting to develop lackeys is obviously a decent idea. Do you want to keep your Vile Fiend at 5 health, or do you want to put it down to 2? Personally here, I'm a fan of getting my lackey. It can make such a big difference. Yeah. But you do have to make the trade. I think maybe you don't. That being said, if you're going to go this way, I guess it's rush. You can't go face with a 3-5. This is a close call for me. Yeah, I think this is fine. You do have to get all the damage you can. The ramp produced by the Zephyrus is irritating. Okay, now you can play your challenger and get ready to inner rage it and copy it. This is how you win this matchup. Have a 110, which would be a 112 if you want it. Then next turn turn it into a 311, copy it with your mercenaries. And if that doesn't go all the way, hope that your brute gets the job finished. It's a lot of damage. And it bypasses most of Mage's removal. You force them to have the freezing half of their deck. Like, you don't care that it's not attacking the turn it comes into play and killing a minion. You just have a giant thing that's hard to remove. He's hovering over the bomb. And the problem with this is, the bombs are great if you've got the skipper, but he doesn't have the skipper. Like, bombing your opponent from an empty board is great fun. You might land 3 bombs in their face, an average of 2.5 each, that's 7.5. If you high roll a little bit, you might get 9 or 10 damage into their face. But at the moment, what you're trying to do is kill your opponent as quickly as possible from an empty board. And for me, that's making a giant challenger, copying it, and forcing the mage to burn resources. Meanwhile, we have everybody's favourite card in Hearthstone, the puzzle box, just doing its thing. It's not been a particularly good one so far. But that's the problem, they don't need to be particularly good. This is still good enough. I haven't kept track well enough of whether the challengers would have survived. But there was an earthquake in there, so I suspect they would not. I mean, that's 7 of the 11 damage done to start with. And it was only one challenger that would have been in play, so yeah. Jing keeping it back may have survived there. And this is where you just have to decide what you're going to do. So, one reason for going the other way is to hold back on combo. There is no Grom in any of these decks this first week. I'm just going to double check that. But Gromash came about in most of the decks a little bit later than this. Let me just check. Yeah, he's actually only got one Cork on Elite in here as well. So his options for winning with the combo are very limited. And that has allowed for the extra 2-drops he has in the deck. So probably had Demon Hunter in mind when he built this, but yeah, he's probably had Demon Hunter in mind. That's fine. That's the deck. You've got to leave up Demon Hunter or Warrior. If you leave up Demon Hunter, you need to be able to take it down. But I feel that you're favoured enough as Warrior as it is. So maybe some early board occupation against Rogue, but again, you're favoured against that as it is. Either way, he went for a lot of early 2-drops. Has whittled Yueying down to 14. So he can do 12. He can actually do 14 from hand when he gets to 8 mana with the Lackey, the Mercenary, the Inner Rage, and the Corkon that he doesn't have. And it's a long time between now and 14, but that's something that'll be on his mind. A way to win the game. And Yueying will be thinking, well, all I need to do is heal for a small amount, and I'm probably safe. And healing for a small amount might be the incredible Reno, or the amazing Reno. Things all go a bit funny when you're reading Chinese deck lists. We're going to have some fun. And the board is cleared. Irritatingly, cannot play the... Well, unless he wants to inner rage the opposing Reno, he cannot play his Brute this turn. Not drawing Risky Skipper or Ankar, obviously a big deal here. And there is almost not a play in his hand that makes any sense right now. Yeah, having to play the Vile Fiend just because there's nothing else to do. And Yueying sits forward in his chair seeing that. It's like, what? You've got 6 mana and you're spending a third of it on a card that will never impact this game. Well, Jing is just playing the cards he can play this turn. This is a horrendous looking Hearthstone turn. Not aided by the fact he was puzzle boxed out of it, but also part of this is part of his deck build. If you're going to play Vile Fiends in your deck that needs a really rapid start, when you play against that mage and you don't have the Corkon combo left, at least in not any great size, it's going to cause you some troubles when you do draw that part of your deck. But Yueying's still on 14, still in the danger zone, and this will be a massive relief. Yeah, and Jing exhales there. This having to now do an extra 8 damage, which is most likely what was done, is enough to put this pretty much out of reach. Draws the Risky Skipper, so can have one good Hearthstone turn here. So the way you do this, you work out that if you get 4 minions in play, they'll all be injured. Well, 2 minions and the opposing 2, all 4 will be injured. Your Brute costs 3, so you do have the option to play a Skipper and a 3-drop and a Brute. The problem being that your 3-drops are either the Challenger, which dies, or the Mercenary, which I think Jing is clearly saving to try and get an OTK from. So with all that in mind, you probably just have to jam your 7/7 and wait a turn. Try and get more information. Yeah, he comes to the same conclusion as me. He's also looking as thrilled about the situation as I am. Yueying's got to get through one more turn. And then he can play Reno at will. Two Renos. Prospect I never thought I'd see. When the original Reno was made, I thought, yes, it's gone. And now we have two of them in one hand. Ouch. The flashbacks. Okay, double skipper means you can do 4 damage to things a lot more easily. This is a pretty startling wide board though. So you want to kill as much as you can and try and end up with 2 brutes in play. Not easy, but can be done. I think you can get 6 injured minions to get your first brute down for 1. You'll have 6 injured minions again, I think. Maybe, depending on what you do, you would have 7. And then you can copy a brute. This is going to be a good turn. He's going to end up with some large amount of attack on the board. That's going to get blizzarded, by the way. But he's going to get a large amount of attack on the board at the end of this turn. So the obvious card you would think of is the skipper. That doesn't really work. That makes things bad. I think you sacrifice the Warmaw Challenger here, honestly. Like, this is one of the best cards in your deck and it's sat in your hand the whole game. I don't know. But yeah, this is a nice looking Hearthstone turn. You've switched everything around. Shows the power of the risky skipper and all the combos in this deck. But for Yueying, it's great. He's also seen some of the bigger threats leave. He now knows he's in combo range for more than 14. Korkan Elite, Inner Rage, Rampage, plus the Mercenaries, it becomes 18. So I think Blizzard and Twilight Drake, but not in that order, because you want it to be as big as possible. It's probably just fine. Also depends if you're expecting to have to Reno, or if you're going to Reno now and save your Blizzard, I guess. Maybe you just want to get that armor in case you've miscalculated. I guess with double Inner Rage, you could do 22 with a Korkan combo, which you don't have covered. Trying to work out if an Inner Rage has been played. I don't think it has. So double Inner Rage, Rampage, Korkan Elite, Mercenaries would be 22. And again, sort of showing the downside of having the smaller version of the deck. There are some upsides to it, like sometimes with eggs you just get all tangled up and your egg sits there and doesn't do anything. But Jing has not had the greatest of days so far. Like an unplayable rogue hand, one of the worst rogue hands I've seen in this meta in Game 1. Game 2 not going his way, and Game 3 also not going his way. Yueying looking pretty good as well. Stay focused, been very efficient with his cards. Lucky Future. Going to go to 1-on-1, assuming he wins this, which isn't quite settled yet, but it's starting to look like it. They'll take that from the first week. I feel like they're one of the teams that will fancy their chance. Although all of these teams will fancy their chances. There's a very strong lineup in this team league. Team Liquid will be entering the fray later in the day. Yeah, you heard that right. That is Team Liquid, Bunny Hopper, Purple and Frozen. 3 players that, if you're watching this broadcast, you're probably very familiar with. My goodness. I think Double Auctioneer might just be too terrifying. Just keeping everything under control. Trying to get this lethal over with. He knows that he's not going to die to 3 cards, or 4 cards, depending how you view that. So he knows he's okay. If he can kill his opponent in 2 turns, that's just great. Yeah, gets the news that he's been expecting for some time now. that everything's just about out of range. And right from near the start, he's just been a little bit planless, a bit ambitious with the bombs, I felt. I really do feel that you're looking to push 2 or 3 bombs to face in this matchup and develop your 110 early, which is hard to remove at the start of the game. But Jing is in, I was going to say big trouble, but it's more than that. This game is over bar the shouting, which is my job to do. So yeah, here's some shouting. Way! Shout, shout. Make sure Yueying doesn't do anything silly and self-destructive, and he should be good. Yeah, I was wondering if he's just going to put up a taunt here and say that's just more defense. And that is where he's going with this. Divine Shield, really irritating. Just making sure he doesn't die to combo. And this is a problem. Obviously, bombing from this situation isn't very productive, but he's got to go for it. I'm not criticising that at all. Definitely got to go with it. Might clear up some bits and pieces. But you want to clear up the face. And the face is heavily, heavily protected right now. He knows that if he plays the mercenary here, he can never win the game through combo. But also if he doesn't play the mercenary here, what's the plan? Well, what's the plan to even get to the point where he can win if he draws a cork on elite, is what I'm wondering. This, as they say in chess, is checkmate. Or is it Zugzwang? It's Zugzwang at this point. He's being forced to do something he doesn't want to. And that usually leads to checkmate. Yeah, this is just basically he has to do it. He knows it's given up his combo. He knows it's given up his chance of winning the game, but the chance of this winning the game is still more than the other play. The bombs might have gone insane. Jing gives it up, and Yueying gets on the scoreboard. Jing, however, takes his second 3-0 loss in a row, and then has to wait for 3 weeks to try again. We'll see you soon.